many of the artifacts that have come out of modern archaeological excavations still don't have an answer to what their full purpose could have been. This is an interesting item known as the Antikythera mechanism. It was found by some sponge divers in 1908 off the coast of Antikythera. And what's so interesting about this mechanism is that it's basically a handheld planetarium. Now, this under radar showed that it had over between 38 and 70 different little cogs and wheels, more complicated than a modern-day Swiss watch, yet it's over 2,000 years old. They don't know how it was made or who could have created it, but they give theories that possibly someone like Archimedes or someone in the great Greek time period would have had the knowledge to build this type of device, yet they really don't know for sure. Some of the artifacts shown in Dendera in Egypt, we have tombs and recesses, dark crypts all over Egypt that have intricate hieroglyphs on all over the walls and the ceiling. And Egyptologists will say, oh well, if there's no evidence of flame, no carbon burning or soot on the ceiling, how are they lighting in these dark recesses to actually see, to carve these hieroglyphs or to paint them? The only other theory aside from a torch would be copper reflective mirrors. Now, copper can only reflect so far down these shafts, so an alternative theory is they had electricity. You can see what they're clearly holding up here, what looks like a light bulb, and it's actually plugged into some type of device. Now, modern archaeologists today say, oh, well, this is an eggplant. They're holding up an eggplant symbolically. Okay. Well, to me, it looks like a very large, what could be attributed as a light bulb. We've also found another interesting artifact, which has been known as the Baghdad Battery. In that same era, we have the Sumerian civilization. And in their own rise to technology, we've discovered over a dozen of what are called the Baghdad batteries, which is basically a 4,000-year-old battery, a clay jar with a copper lining and iron rod down the center, and if you fill it with a weak acidic liquid like grape juice or vinegar, lemon juice, and you touch the copper and the iron, you get a positive charge. There's evidence all over the earth of these megalithic monuments that are left to cultures that have then built on their civilizations on top of it. So in South America, for instance, Tiwanaku, Teotihuacan, we have many of these sites with megalithic monuments that we can't explain who built them. And if you were to ask the Mayans or the Incas or the Toltecs, who built these structures, they say, oh, well, these were built by Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl, the gods. They say that there was another great civilization that was here that predated them, yet what's the evidence to show that they existed? Where did they go? So what I point out is that we have these megalithic structures all over the earth that when looked at closely, there's no explanation for how they got there. Here are stones found in Pumapuku, which basically fit together like Legos. They're built in such an intricate way, carved such a way, so that they would fit together. You can see here also, there was molten liquid metal poured to connect these devices. Amazing technology for a culture that's 4,000 years old. And you can see here, this larger one, there's symmetrical drilled holes, precision drilled holes throughout the stone. And there's no way to do this without modern technology of some type of a drill. Yet here it is, and stands for all time of evidence to see. We have evidence of archaeological sites pointing to astronomical locations and set out in a way where it's been designed to point towards certain astronomical alignments. What's really interesting about the South American pyramids is that it's theorized that there's literally a pyramid for every planet in our known solar system, and that these actually are plotting the various planets that we have. Now, this isn't a widely known or accepted view, but the interesting thing is that these pyramids are known as the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Sun. They do have a correlation to an astronomical terminology. So it's an interesting layout when we look at the sophistication and the grandeur of something built by a culture that's, again, what we don't attribute to, Stone Age cultures or primitive technology, yet they have knowledge that's been displayed in a way where now with our sciences and understandings we can look at this and use radar and mapping, look at the telemetry and say, well, wait a minute, how could they have known that this is actually 1/10 of a degree off to the true north? So some of these pyramids, again, the Great Pyramid of the Sun, it's a very interesting coincidence that the base of the Pyramid of the Sun and the base of the Pyramid in Giza are very close in scale. And when you look through, again, some of these pyramids, you know, this is very comparable to the Egyptian size and mass, but there's really no explanation for what they were being used for other than other previous cultures of them come, you know, in South America, Mayans, the Toltecs, Aztecs, and have come in and, you know, taken over these lands and these monuments for themselves, assuming that they were built by their ancestors. But when we start to get into some of these more interesting, well-known structures like the 3 Giza pyramids, it turns out in 10,500 BC, the pyramids form a terrestrial map of Orion. They are exactly lined up with the pyramid offset, just like Orion, perfectly matching in 10,500 BC, mimicking what it sees in the sky. Also, the Sphinx at that exact date is looking east at the constellation of Leo, which is basically in the formation of a lion. So in 10,500 BC, we have a terrestrial alignment with the structures in Giza to constellations in the sky. Now, what's the purpose of that? Other than to say, well, it's very possible then, based upon also geological evidence, that the pyramid and the Sphinx are way older than 4,500 BC. As it is, you know, with the Egyptian culture having to carry these stones at their weight, 20 stones a day, 24 hours a day, there's just no way in the 20-year time period of the dynasty that the pyramid could have been completed. All around the world, we have depictions of flight, meaning artifacts, depictions, wall reliefs that show man depicting what he viewed as flight. Now, again, if you're living in a clay hut using stone tools, anything flying in the sky was alive. It was a bird. They didn't even have hot air balloons. So when we have these depictions of flight, and more specifically people coming down with the power of flight, it starts to raise the question of, well, what were they trying to tell us? Were they looking at birdmen? No. Interestingly enough, though, archaeologists, when they first started doing excavations in Iraq in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the archaeologists see all these wall reliefs and descriptions of what the Sumerians called their gods, which was labeled Annunaki. And the term Annunaki just simply means those who from heaven come to earth. But the archaeologists didn't understand what the Anunnaki could have meant. They're pulling out tablets that show descriptions of the outer planets, the distance of the outer planets between, you know, how far is the distance between these planets. We didn't discover Pluto until 1930. So in the early 1900s, when archaeologists start finding all these relics of the Anunnaki, they labeled them birdmen and said, oh, well, this is the Sumerian legacy of their mythology, talking about how they inscribed their creation myth. Every culture has a creation myth. It's a story told to young children about how we get here. Well, what if these stories are actually fact, based upon ancient man's references available at that time? Anything flying, alive in the skies wasn't something they could attribute with a technological reference. So they would give it a spiritual reference to say, wings, power of flight. Just like the Egyptians and the sun god Ra, this is carried over. But this description by the Sumerians of a winged disc was something that carried over into other cultures like the Egyptian culture and Akkadian cultures as this symbol for some type of divine intervention coming down and using this form of symbology. This is a Sumerian god known as Ishtar, or also Inanna, that came down, and there's actually a Sumerian tale of how Inanna liked to fly the skies of Earth, and one day she chose a Sumerian king, Gilgamesh, that she found attractive and wanted to take him up into her abode in the sky, and he said, thank you, but no thanks, because all the men that go up with you never come back and are turned up dead, so thanks, but no thanks. And this is an actual Sumerian tale that's, talking about Ishtar. So this kind of leads into an overall topic of what's known as the ancient astronaut theory, that basically all cultures around the world talk about a time when gods visited ancient man. When we hear about descriptions of these, we hear things like chariots of fire, or Ezekiel's wheel, a firmament within the heavens, a solid mass within the heavens is what they're saying. They didn't have any way to describe what they were saying, whereas today we would be like, it's a UFO. Different terminology, but it's the same explanation being given. It's some type of conveyance of a craft being piloted by beings like us. So we start to look at these tales of angels in the Bible and see a similarity of the descriptions of the Annunaki by the Sumerians, but in a much earlier context, because, well, the chicken and the egg syndrome here is clear. The Sumerians are stone tablets, and the Christian and the Old Testament are tales that have been been compiled over time, but here we have the source tales coming from the Sumerian culture. So this kind of really started to sum up questions I had as a Christian for, where is heaven? I'm just told it's up there somewhere. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of the information that came from the Sumerian culture gets to be very specific and parallels a lot of the modern biblical tales for where we come from. A lot of these depictions and wall reliefs I found to be very interesting. Here we have a depiction of an Anunnaki coming down to meet a Sumerian king, showing again some type of conveyance of the power of flight. But, this is a common theme where the power of flight or some type of conveyance of flight is being shown throughout these Middle Eastern cultures, but it comes from the Sumerian culture of the Anunnaki.